Arthur dropped to one knee in the middle of a crowded, Michelin-starred dining room, presenting a flawless 4-carat Cartier diamond to a woman who was not his wife. The crowd erupted into applause, smartphones instantly recording every second, and the video went viral across Chicago's elite social circles before dessert even arrived. It was the perfect fairy tale proposal, except Arthur was still legally bound to his wife of 9 years. He fully expected Naomi to scream, to file a scorched earth lawsuit, or to throw his custom Italian suits onto their manicured lawn. Instead, Naomi did absolutely nothing. She didn't call. She didn't cry. She vanished into a terrifying, absolute silence. And that silence was about to tear Arthur's perfectly curated life to shreds. Silverware clinked against fine china at Bavette's bar and boeuf, the low lighting casting a romantic, amber glow over the exclusive Chicago steakhouse. Arthur Pendleton adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Tom Ford suit, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was a man accustomed to control. At 42, he was the founding partner of Pendleton Group, a premier real estate development firm that had reshaped the city's skyline. But tonight, he was making the most reckless decision of his life. Sitting across from him was Sierra Davies. She was 27, a vibrant, blonde public relations executive who laughed loudly, wore plunging necklines, and looked at Arthur as if he were a god who had descended from Olympus. She was the polar opposite of his wife. Naomi Pendleton was a force of quiet, terrifying elegance. A brilliant corporate attorney who had stepped away from her partnership track at Kirkland & Ellis to launch a highly successful contemporary art gallery in River North. Naomi was stunning, a tall, statuesque black woman with sharp cheekbones, flawless mahogany skin, and an intellect that often left Arthur feeling heavily outmatched. Their marriage had become a boardroom negotiation, devoid of the messy, chaotic passion Arthur suddenly found himself craving. Sierra gave him that chaos. Sierra made him feel young. "You're quiet tonight," Sierra murmured, reaching across the white tablecloth to trace the face of his Patek Philippe watch. "Thinking about your next high-rise?" "No," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. "I'm thinking about you." He hadn't planned to do it tonight. He hadn't even filed the divorce papers yet. His lawyer, Harrison Forbes, had explicitly warned him to get Naomi's signature on a separation agreement before making any public moves. "Naomi is a legal sniper, Arthur," Harrison had warned just yesterday over scotch. "Do not humiliate her. If you back her into a corner, she will take half your company and smile while she does it." But Arthur was intoxicated by the atmosphere, by the vintage Bordeaux, and by the sheer arrogance of a man who believed his wealth made him untouchable. He slipped his hand into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing the velvet box. He wanted to claim Sierra, to make a grand, undeniable statement that he was starting a new chapter. Arthur pushed his chair back and stood up. The low hum of chatter in the restaurant began to falter as nearby diners noticed the handsome, wealthy developer making a scene. Sierra's eyes widened, her manicured hands flying to her mouth. He knelt on the polished hardwood floor. "Sierra, from the moment I met you, you brought a light into my life that I didn't know I was missing. I want the world to know you are mine." He snapped the Cartier box open. The diamond caught the dim lighting, throwing fractured rainbows across the table. "Will you marry me?" Sierra shrieked, a high, piercing sound of pure triumph, and threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. "Yes, yes, Arthur, of course, I will." The restaurant erupted. Diners applauded, and at least a dozen smartphones were held aloft, their camera lights flashing. Arthur smiled, wrapping his arms around Sierra's waist, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He had done it. The secret was out. By the time the valet brought his Porsche Panamera around to the front of the restaurant, Arthur's phone was vibrating so violently it felt like a live wire in his pocket. He ignored it while he kissed Sierra goodbye, putting her into an Uber Black to head to her Gold Coast apartment. He needed to go home and face the music. Sitting in the driver's seat of his Porsche, Arthur finally pulled out his phone. He had 84 unread text messages and 14 missed calls. Most were from Harrison. He tapped on a text from his sister, Clara. It was just a link to an Instagram reel with the caption, "What the hell have you done?" Arthur clicked the link. The video had been posted by a prominent Chicago food blogger who happened to be dining 2 tables away. It already had 300,000 views. The caption read, "Billionaire developer Arthur Pendleton proposes to his mistress at Bavette's. Wait, isn't he still married to gallery owner Naomi Pendleton?" Chicago drama scandal. A cold sweat broke out on the back of Arthur's neck. The reality of his actions crashed over him like a wave of ice water. He had just publicly humiliated a woman who possessed a ruthlessly analytical mind and a deep network of powerful friends. Naomi was going to destroy him. He started the engine, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He imagined the scene waiting for him at their 6-bedroom Lincoln Park mansion. Naomi would be throwing his clothes out the 2nd-story window. She would be screaming. She would have already changed the locks. He braced himself for the screaming, formulating his defense, mentally cataloguing which bank accounts he needed to freeze first thing in the morning. Arthur pulled into the circular driveway of his home just after midnight. The sprawling brick mansion was eerily quiet. The exterior lights bathed the manicured hedges in a soft, welcoming glow, looking exactly as it always did. He hesitated with his hand on the heavy oak front door, taking a deep breath before turning the key. He stepped into the grand foyer, dropping his keys into the silver bowl on the console table. The sharp clink echoed through the silent house. "Naomi," he called out, his voice betraying a slight tremor. No answer. He walked cautiously into the living room. Everything was immaculate. The velvet throw pillows were perfectly chopped. The contemporary sculptures Naomi had curated were in their exact places. He moved to the kitchen, spotless. The dining room, empty. A knot of genuine dread formed in his stomach. Had she left? Had she packed her bags and gone to a hotel, or worse, to her formidable defense attorney friend, Beatrice? Arthur took the sweeping staircase 2 steps at a time, heading toward the master suite. He pushed the heavy double doors open. Naomi was sitting in the corner armchair, illuminated only by the warm light of a brass reading lamp. She was wearing silk emerald green pajamas that contrasted beautifully with her dark skin. Her natural hair was wrapped neatly in a silk scarf. She had a pair of reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, and she was calmly turning the pages of a thick, hardcover biography. Arthur stopped dead in his tracks. His heart was pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. Naomi didn't look up immediately. She finished the paragraph she was reading, carefully slid a velvet bookmark between the pages, closed the book, and set it on the side table. Finally, she looked at him. Her dark eyes were unreadable, placid, calm, terrifyingly still. "You're home late," she said. Her voice was smooth, carrying its usual rich cadence. There was no tremor, no anger. Arthur swallowed hard. "Naomi, He had prepared for a firestorm. He had prepared to dodge flying objects. He had no defense against polite observation. "Did you look at your phone tonight?" "Briefly," Naomi replied, standing up. She walked over to her vanity and picked up a jar of La Mer night cream. She began to methodically massage it into her hands. "I had a lovely evening. The new exhibition installation took longer than expected at the gallery. We're featuring a new sculptor from Dakar next month. It's going to be quite demanding." Arthur stared at her, entirely bewildered. "Naomi, please. I know you saw it." She paused, looking at him through the mirror's reflection. "Saw what, Arthur?" "The video." He forced the words out, feeling like a clumsy child. "From the restaurant. I proposed to Sierra." Naomi continued rubbing the lotion into her hands. Her expression did not change. Not a flinch, not a widening of the eyes. "Oh, I see." She turned around, walked past him to her side of the massive California king bed, and slipped beneath the Egyptian cotton sheets. She reached over and clicked off her bedside lamp. "Don't forget to set the alarm, Arthur. The housekeeper is coming at 8, and you know how she hates when the security system goes off." Arthur stood frozen in the middle of the luxurious bedroom. "That's it?" he demanded, his voice rising in sudden, irrational panic. "That's all you have to say? I just told you I proposed to another woman in front of half the city, and you're talking about the alarm code?" Naomi's voice floated through the darkness, calm and indifferent. "I am very tired, Arthur. Good night." He didn't sleep a wink. Arthur lay rigid on the far edge of the mattress, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of his wife's breathing. She was fast asleep. How could she possibly sleep? It felt like psychological warfare. The next morning, Arthur woke up at 7. Naomi was already gone. He found a perfectly written sticky note on the granite kitchen island. "Left early for a meeting with the caterers. We have the Shed Aquarium Gala on Friday. Please make sure your tuxedo is pressed." Arthur stared at the yellow square of paper as if it were written in an alien language. The Shed Aquarium Gala. They were still going to a high society charity event together. He drove to his downtown office in a state of deep paranoia. When he walked onto the executive floor of Pendleton Group, the murmurs instantly stopped. His employees averted their eyes, pretending to look at their monitors. The entire city knew he was an adulterer. He immediately called his lawyer. "Harrison, what the hell is going on? Did she contact you?" "Arthur, my phone has been blowing up all morning," Harrison said, sounding exhausted. "But no, I haven't heard a peep from Naomi or anyone representing her. Are you sure she knows?" "I told her to her face last night," Arthur yelled, pacing his glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago River. "She didn't react. She told me to press my tuxedo for Friday. Harrison, it's a trap. It has to be a trap. She's moving assets, right? Check the joint accounts." "I already did," Harrison replied. "Nothing. Not a single cent has been transferred. The mortgage is untouched. Her credit cards show normal activity. A coffee at Starbucks. A dry cleaning bill. Arthur, she's doing exactly what I told you she would do if you provoked her. She's playing chess while you're playing checkers. By doing nothing. By letting you drive yourself insane trying to figure out her next move," Harrison warned. "Do not underestimate her." By Wednesday, Arthur was a wreck. He was snapping at his employees, drinking too much scotch in the evenings, and jumping every time his phone rang. Sierra, meanwhile, was growing impatient. "Arthur, this is getting ridiculous," Sierra whined over lunch at a discreet cafe. She was flashing her 4-carat diamond, but her expression was sour. "The video has 3 million views now. My friends are asking when the wedding is. Why hasn't she filed? Why are you still living in that house with her?" "Because she's ignoring it," Arthur snapped, running a hand through his hair. "She cooks dinner. She asks about my day. She acts like you don't exist." Sierra narrowed her eyes. "Well, you need to force her hand. Serve her the papers. Kick her out." "I can't just kick her out, Sierra. Her name is on the deed, too. And if I serve her papers aggressively, she'll drag the company through a multi-year audit." He returned home that evening to find Naomi in the conservatory, pruning her collection of rare orchids. She looked up and smiled, a genuine, warm smile that sent a shiver down Arthur's spine. "Arthur, perfect timing," she said pleasantly, clipping a dead stem. "I was just looking over the guest list for the summer retreat in Aspen. I noticed you didn't RSVP for your sister. Should I add Clara to the list, or is she too busy with her new practice?" Arthur stared at his wife, watching the sunlight catch the gold hoops in her ears. She was radiant. She was completely unbothered. Friday evening arrived with the suffocating humidity, typical of a Chicago July. But inside the Pendleton mansion, the air was practically glacial. Arthur stood in front of his dressing room mirror, fumbling with his silk bow tie. His hands were shaking. He had spent the last 48 hours waiting for the other shoe to drop, but Naomi had maintained her serene, impenetrable facade. She walked into the master bedroom, and Arthur's breath caught in his throat. Naomi was wearing a custom midnight blue Oscar de la Renta gown that hugged her statuesque frame before pooling into a subtle train. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. A vintage Van Cleef and Arpels set Arthur had bought her for their 5th anniversary. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in an elegant, architectural updo. She looked like royalty. She looked like a woman who had absolutely nothing to lose. "Your tie is crooked, Arthur," she observed smoothly, gliding over to him. She reached out, her cool, manicured fingers swiftly adjusting the silk knot at his throat. She patted his chest twice, firmly. "There. We can't have the city's premier developer looking disheveled for the cameras, can we?" Arthur grabbed her wrist, not hard, but desperate. "Naomi, please, we don't have to go to this. We can stay home. We can talk." Naomi gently but firmly extracted her wrist from his grip. "Nonsense. The Shed Aquarium Gala is one of the most important philanthropic events of the season. The board is expecting us at our table, and I am not going to forfeit my deposit on this table just because you had a momentary lapse of judgment at a steakhouse. The car is waiting." The ride to the museum campus was an agonizing stretch of silence. Arthur stared out the window at the glittering skyline he had helped build, feeling entirely powerless. When the black, sleek Maybach pulled up to the grand entrance of the Shed Aquarium, the flashbulbs of the local press were already popping. "Smile, Arthur," Naomi murmured, looping her arm through his. "Remember your posture." They stepped onto the blue carpet. The moment the paparazzi recognized them, a murmur ripped through the press pool, followed by a frantic cacophony of camera shutters. The Arthur Pendleton, the man whose viral Mistress proposal was currently sitting at 4 million views on TikTok, was walking the carpet with his beautiful, legally wedded wife. Inside, the gala was a surreal underwater dreamscape. The main rotunda was bathed in undulating blue and purple lights, with massive tanks of colorful reef fish serving as living backdrops. Usually, Arthur worked these rooms with predatory confidence, glad-handing politicians and whispering to zoning commissioners. Tonight, he felt like the prey. Every time they approached a group of socialites or business moguls, the conversation abruptly died, replaced by awkward, strained greetings. "Naomi, darling." "Arthur," greeted Beatrice Sterling, a formidable woman who sat on the museum's board. Her eyes darted between them, searching for blood. "You both look remarkably well." "Thank you, Beatrice," Naomi smiled, her tone warm and utterly convincing. "It's a beautiful setup tonight. I hear the silent auction has a private villa in Tuscany this year. I might have to bid on it. I've been craving a long, quiet vacation." Arthur swallowed his champagne in one gulp. He was suffocating. He excused himself and retreated to the shadows near the beluga whale habitat, leaning against the cool acrylic glass. He pulled out his phone. 7 texts from Sierra. Where are you? My friends are saying you're at the gala with her. Arthur, answer me. You promised me we were going public. I'm not doing this. He was typing a frantic reply when he heard the sharp click of stiletto heels echoing on the marble floor. He looked up, his blood running cold. Sierra was marching toward him, her face flushed with fury. She had clearly used her PR connections to secure a press pass, wearing a flashy, inappropriate red sequined dress that clashed violently with the elegant black tie atmosphere. Sierra, what the hell are you doing here? Arthur hissed, grabbing her elbow and dragging her further into the dim lighting of the marine mammal wing. Are you insane? There are reporters everywhere. I'm insane? Sierra's voice shrilled, echoing slightly in the cavernous hallway. You proposed to me in front of hundreds of people, and 3 days later you're parading your wife around in front of the press? Do you know how stupid I look right now? People are calling me a side piece on the internet, Arthur. Keep your voice down, Arthur pleaded, looking around frantically. I told you, she's playing games. I can't just blow up my life without a strategy. My lawyer says— I don't care what your lawyer says, Sierra yelled, yanking her arm away. You're going to walk out there. You are going to tell her it's over, and you are going to leave with me. Right now. Or I am going to the Chicago Tribune tomorrow morning with every single text message you've sent me for the last 8 months. Sierra, please. Excuse me. The voice was soft, rich, and cut through the tension like a scalpel. Arthur whipped around. Naomi was standing 10 feet away, her hands elegantly clasped in front of her. She looked at Sierra with the mild, detached curiosity of a scientist observing a slightly irritating insect. Sierra froze, her bravado faltering for a split second before she puffed her chest out. You must be Naomi. Look, I don't want to do this here, but Arthur and I— You must be the enthusiast from the steakhouse, Naomi interrupted, her voice never rising above a polite, conversational volume. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I am Naomi Pendleton. Sierra narrowed her eyes. I know who you are, and you know who I am. I'm the woman your husband is in love with. He gave me a ring. We're getting married. Naomi's gaze dropped to Sierra's hand. She observed the massive Cartier diamond for a long, agonizing moment. Then she smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It's a beautiful stone, Arthur, Naomi said, shifting her gaze to her husband. Slightly ostentatious for a Tuesday evening, perhaps, but very loud. It suits her. She turned back to Sierra. My dear, I understand you are feeling a bit insecure tonight. It is perfectly natural for someone in your precarious position. But I must ask you to lower your voice. You are upsetting the belugas, and this is a charity event. Sierra's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? Your husband is leaving you. He chose me. Why aren't you crying? Why aren't you screaming? Naomi took a slow step forward. The ambient blue light caught the sharp angles of her face. Scream? Over Arthur? My dear girl, you are under the mistaken impression that you have stolen a prize. You haven't stolen anything. You have merely volunteered to manage a liability. Naomi turned to Arthur, who was pale and sweating through his shirt. Arthur, the salad course is being served. Please escort your guest to the exit before security handles it, and then join me at table 4. Beatrice is waiting. Without waiting for a response, Naomi turned her back on them and glided gracefully back toward the main ballroom, leaving absolute devastation in her wake. Sierra burst into angry, humiliated tears, ripping the diamond ring off her finger and throwing it at Arthur's chest before storming toward the exit. The ring clattered loudly against the floor, rolling to a stop near a drain. Arthur stood alone in the blue-lit hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of the gala. He picked up the heavy ring, slipped it into his pocket, and felt a profound, horrifying realization wash over him. Naomi wasn't just ignoring his betrayal. She was completely immune to it, and a woman who had nothing left to lose was the most dangerous creature on earth. The weekend passed in an agonizing blur of scotch and paranoia. Arthur slept in the guest room, though slept was a generous term. He lay awake, listening to the silent house, waiting for Naomi to serve him with divorce papers, to freeze his accounts, to do something. But Monday morning arrived, and Naomi was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking matcha and reviewing an auction catalogue as if the catastrophic events of Friday night had never occurred. "Good morning, Arthur," she said mildly. "Don't forget to sign the authorization for the landscaping company. The boxwoods have developed a terrible blight." Arthur nodded numbly, grabbed his briefcase, and practically fled the house. He couldn't take it anymore. The silence was actively deteriorating his sanity. If Naomi wasn't going to fight him on the domestic front, she had to be plotting something behind the scenes. He needed to know what she was doing. At 10 a.m., Arthur sat in the shadowy, wood-panelled office of Thomas Greeley. Greeley was a former forensic accountant for the FBI who had transitioned into highly discreet corporate espionage and private investigation. He charged exorbitant rates and asked zero ethical questions. "I need you to look into my wife," Arthur said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk. Inside were Naomi's personal details, her banking information, and the LLC structure for her gallery. Greeley, a stout, bald man with sharp, predatory eyes, opened the envelope and flipped through the pages. "Infidelity? You want me to follow her?" "No, the infidelity is mine," Arthur said bluntly. "The whole city knows it. What I need to know is what she's doing. She hasn't hired a divorce attorney. She hasn't touched our joint accounts. I need you to track her communications, her meetings, her digital footprint. Dig into the gallery. She's a former corporate lawyer. She's setting a trap, and I need to know where the tripwire is." Greeley nodded slowly. "I'll put my best people on it. It will take a few days to get a comprehensive map of her movements." "I don't have a few days," Arthur said, his voice tight. "Find something by Wednesday." For the next 2 days, Arthur threw himself into his work, trying to ignore the constant barrage of angry voicemails from Sierra. His primary focus was the Orion Spire, a massive 90-story mixed-use skyscraper slated for the South Loop. It was his legacy project, a $2 billion development that would cement Pendleton Group as a titan of industry. The groundbreaking was scheduled for next month. On Wednesday afternoon, Greeley bypassed Arthur's secretary and walked directly into his glass-walled office, locking the door behind him. He didn't look happy. "Sit down, Arthur," Greeley said, dropping a thick, leather-bound dossier onto the glass desk. Arthur's stomach plummeted. "What did you find? Did she hire Beatrice Sterling's firm?" "No," Greeley said, taking a seat and leaning forward. "She hasn't spoken to a single family law attorney. She hasn't drafted a separation agreement. In fact, she hasn't done anything remotely related to a divorce." Arthur frowned, a spark of desperate hope igniting in his chest. "So she's really just staying? She's forgiving it?" Greeley looked at him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Arthur, you are married to a financial assassin. She's not forgiving you. She's eviscerating you." Greeley opened the dossier and pointed to a series of heavily redacted calendar logs and banking transactions. "Naomi hasn't been going to her art gallery, Arthur. For the past 3 weeks, long before you proposed to your mistress, she has been taking private meetings at the Union League Club. Do you know who she's been meeting with?" Arthur shook his head, his throat dry. "Sterling Carmichael," Greeley said. The name hit Arthur like a physical blow to the chest. Sterling Carmichael was the CEO of Vanguard Equity, the primary private equity firm backing the $2 billion for the Orion Spire. Carmichael was famously conservative, notoriously ruthless, and held the purse strings to Arthur's entire future. "Why the hell is my wife meeting with my lead investor?" Arthur whispered. "Because she isn't just your wife," Greeley explained, tapping a document. "Naomi introduced you to Carmichael 8 years ago through her gallery connections, remember? She fostered that relationship. And what you seem to have forgotten is that Naomi drafted the foundational operating agreements and the primary funding contracts for Pendleton Group back when she was still practicing law." Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. "Yes, she was my chief legal counsel for the first 2 years. But we updated those contracts. We amended them." "You amended the operational clauses," Greeley corrected. "You didn't amend the morality and fiduciary liability clauses. Naomi drafted those with an ironclad, incredibly broad definition of public reputational damage. It's buried on page 84 of the Master Funding Agreement. Basically, if the key principal of Pendleton Group, that's you, engages in public behavior that severely compromises the moral standing or public trust of the firm, the primary investors have the right to trigger an immediate recall of their capital to protect their assets." Arthur stared at the paperwork, his vision blurring. "A morality clause? Nobody enforces those unless there's a criminal indictment. They enforce them when a brilliant lawyer convinces them that a viral public humiliation makes the CEO an unstable liability," Greeley said grimly. "Naomi has been meeting with Carmichael, presenting a highly compelling, legally sound argument that your erratic behavior at that restaurant constitutes a breach of the morality clause. She has been showing them exactly how to legally sever their ties with you without paying a dime in penalty fees." Arthur's phone buzzed on the desk. He looked down. It was an email from Harrison, his lawyer. The subject line read, "Urgent. Vanguard Equity Withdrawal Notice." Arthur's hands trembled as he opened the email. It was a formal, legally binding letter from Vanguard Equity. They were pulling their $1.5 billion commitment from the Orion Spire, citing breach of contract due to extreme public reputational damage. Furthermore, a coalition of secondary investors had filed an emergency injunction to freeze Pendleton Group's current operational funds until a full audit could be conducted. His company was bleeding out. His legacy was dead. Greeley closed the dossier. "She didn't want half of your assets in a messy divorce, Arthur. She decided to make sure there were no assets left to divide. She's burning your empire to the ground, and she hasn't raised her voice once." Arthur did not sleep that night. He spent the dark, suffocating hours pacing the floor of his home office, frantically dialing numbers that went straight to voicemail. By 7 a.m. the Thursday morning, he was pacing the marble lobby of Vanguard Equity's Chicago headquarters. He had bypassed his own office entirely, desperate to intercept Sterling Carmichael before the financial markets opened. When Carmichael finally stepped out of his private elevator, flanked by 2 junior partners, Arthur practically lunged forward. "Sterling, we need to talk," Arthur demanded, his voice echoing sharply against the travertine walls. His bespoke suit was rumpled, his tie missing, and his eyes bloodshot. "You cannot pull the Orion funding. You know the projections on this development. It's a guaranteed 20% return within 5 years. You're letting a personal misunderstanding dictate $1 billion portfolio." Carmichael, a silver-haired titan of industry who possessed the emotional warmth of a glacier, stopped and looked at Arthur. He did not extend his hand. "There is no misunderstanding, Arthur," Carmichael said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Vanguard Equity does not invest in volatile assets. And right now, you are the most volatile asset in Cook County. You humiliated a highly respected woman who happens to be a dear friend to half my board. And you did it for cheap internet clout with a PR assistant. You showed a catastrophic lack of judgment. "It was a mistake," Arthur pleaded, feeling the stares of the security guards burning into his back. "It has nothing to do with my ability to build the Orion Spire. It has everything to do with your fiduciary reliability," Carmichael countered seamlessly. "Naomi provided us with an impeccable legal framework, demonstrating that your actions violated Section 8 of the Principal Partnership Agreement. You breached the morality clause. We are legally exercising our right of withdrawal. The paperwork has been filed with the SEC. Have a good morning, Arthur." Carmichael walked away, leaving Arthur stranded in the lobby. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Arthur's chest. He pulled out his phone and called Harrison. "Harrison, I need a loophole. I need an injunction against Vanguard. We sue them for breach of contract." "Arthur, you can't sue them." Harrison's exhausted voice crackled through the speaker. "I spent the entire night reviewing the original operating agreements Naomi drafted 9 years ago. She didn't just write a morality clause, Arthur. She wrote a poison pill. She structured the entire holding company so that if the principal, you, is found in breach, the board of Pendleton Group has the fiduciary obligation to freeze your shares to protect the investors." "My board works for me," Arthur yelled, drawing horrified looks from passing executives. "Not anymore," Harrison said grimly. "William Sterling called an emergency board meeting for 9 o'clock this morning. They are voting to remove you as CEO, Arthur. And legally, there is absolutely nothing I can do to stop them." Arthur sprinted to his Maybach. He ordered his driver to break every speed limit getting to the Pendleton Group Tower. He burst into the executive boardroom at 9:15 a.m. The room was silent. 6 men and 2 women sat around the massive mahogany table. At the head of the table sat William Sterling, Beatrice's husband and Arthur's oldest business partner. "You can't do this," Arthur gasped, leaning heavily against the heavy glass door. "I built this company. My name is on the building." William looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "And your name is currently dragging our stock price into the gutter. 2 secondary investors pulled out this morning after Vanguard walked. The city zoning commissioner called me personally to say he's pulling the fast-track permits for the South Loop project because he doesn't want his office associated with a viral scandal. You're toxic, Arthur. I can fix it. I'll issue a public apology. I'll step back from public relations." "The vote has already been recorded, Arthur," William said, closing a leather binder on the table. "It was unanimous. You are effectively terminated as Chief Executive Officer of Pendleton Group, pending a full forensic audit of the company's finances. Your keycard has been deactivated. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal effects." Arthur felt his knees go weak. "You're stealing my company." "No," William corrected sharply. "You gave it away. Naomi just handed us the legal scissors to cut the dead weight." Arthur was escorted out of his own building by 2 stone-faced security guards, clutching a cardboard box containing a crystal Scotch decanter, a few framed photographs, and his Mont Blanc pens. The whispers of his employees followed him to the elevator, a humiliating chorus of gossip and judgment. He took a taxi home, his mind completely shattered. He needed to see Naomi. He needed to scream at her, to break her terrifying, placid facade. He stormed into the Lincoln Park mansion, dropping his cardboard box onto the foyer floor with a loud crash. "Naomi!" he roared, his voice tearing from his throat. She was in the dining room, casually sorting through a stack of custom-printed invitations. She looked up, raising a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pristine white trousers, looking like a vision of domestic tranquility. "There is no need to shout, Arthur," she said mildly. "I am standing right here." Arthur crossed the room in 3 massive strides, slamming his hands down on the mahogany dining table. "You destroyed me. You went behind my back and gutted my company. You took my life's work." Naomi set down an invitation. She looked at his shaking, sweaty form with absolute detachment. "I didn't gut your company, Arthur. I simply triggered a safety mechanism I installed nearly a decade ago. I knew who you were when I married you. I knew your ego would eventually outpace your intelligence. I just didn't expect you to be quite so cliché as to propose to a 20-something mistress at Burvette's. You planned this from the beginning?" Arthur stared at her in sheer horror. "I protected my investment from the beginning," Naomi corrected, her voice dropping to a low, lethal purr. "I gave up a partnership at Kirkland & Ellis to write the contracts that made you a billionaire. Did you honestly believe I would let you use the wealth I secured to fund a new life with a PR girl? You humiliated me, Arthur. You thought my silence was weakness. But I wasn't ignoring you. I was merely letting you dig the hole deep enough so that when I finally pushed you in, you would never, ever climb out." Arthur stumbled backward, the sheer magnitude of Naomi's calculation hitting him like a freight train. She hadn't just prepared for his downfall. She had architected the entire structure of his life so that she held the sole demolition detonator. "You're a monster," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling. Naomi picked up a gold fountain pen and elegantly signed her name to the bottom of an invitation. "I am a lawyer, Arthur, and I am a woman who values her peace. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a gallery opening to finalize. Oh, and you should probably check your email. Harrison has been trying to reach you." Arthur pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped the device. There was an urgent message from Harrison, sent 20 minutes ago. "Arthur, do not go to the house. The holding company that owns the property just executed an eviction notice." Arthur stared at the screen, his brain refusing to process the words. He looked up at Naomi. "What did you do to the house?" Naomi smiled, a cold, brilliant flash of white teeth. "Did you forget? We transferred the deed of this property into a revocable domestic trust 3 years ago to shield it from corporate liability. You signed the paperwork on a Tuesday morning while eating a grapefruit. You didn't even read it. It's a joint trust." "It was a joint trust," Naomi corrected gracefully. "Until yesterday. The trust had a behavioral stipulation. In the event of gross marital misconduct resulting in public disparagement, a clause defined by the same parameters as your corporate contract, the injured party retains the exclusive right to dissolve the joint tenancy and transfer the asset into a private LLC. She stood up, smoothing a microscopic wrinkle from her cashmere sweater. "I transferred the property to an LLC I control yesterday afternoon. You are currently trespassing on private property, Arthur. Jackson is waiting in the kitchen to help you pack 2 suitcases. Everything else will be placed in a storage unit. You have 30 minutes before I call the police." Arthur was paralyzed. The walls of the multi-million-dollar mansion seemed to be closing in on him. He had no company. He had no income, as his assets were frozen by the board's emergency injunction, and now he had no home. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, the arrogance completely stripped from his voice, leaving only the pathetic whimper of a broken man. "I hear the Four Seasons is lovely this time of year," Naomi replied. "Though, given that the board froze your platinum accounts, you might want to look into a Marriott." 30 minutes later, Arthur was standing on the sidewalk outside the iron gates of his former home. Jackson, a massive former Marine who served as Naomi's personal head of security, had silently escorted him out, carrying 2 leather duffel bags stuffed with Arthur's clothes. The heavy iron gates clicked shut, locking automatically. Arthur stood on the pavement, the humid Chicago heat suffocating him. He pulled out his phone to call an Uber, only to find a notification from his bank. His primary credit card had been declined for an attempted recurring charge. The freeze was absolute. As he stood there, desperately trying to calculate how much cash he had in his wallet, a nondescript grey sedan pulled up to the curb. A young man in a cheap suit stepped out, holding a thick manila folder. "Arthur Pendleton?" the young man asked. Arthur looked up, numb. "Yes." "You've been served." The man shoved the folder into Arthur's chest, turned on his heel, got back into the sedan, and drove away. Arthur opened the folder with heavy, defeated hands. It was a civil lawsuit filed in the Cook County Circuit Court. The plaintiff was Sierra Davies. He scanned the legal jargon, his vision swimming. Sierra wasn't just suing him, she was trying to financially ruin whatever was left of him. She had hired a vicious, media-hungry personal injury attorney. The lawsuit alleged intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraudulent misrepresentation, and breach of promise. The plaintiff, Ms. Davies, suffered severe public humiliation, career damage, and psychological trauma due to Mr. Pendleton's fraudulent proposal, which he orchestrated while concealing his impending financial ruin and lack of legal separation from his current spouse. Sierra was claiming that Arthur had used her as a pawn, fully aware that his wife was destroying his finances and had ruined her reputation in the PR industry. She was seeking $5 million in damages. Arthur dropped the folder onto the sidewalk. The pages spilled out across the concrete, fluttering in the sticky summer breeze. He had lost everything: his legacy, his fortune, his home, and the young woman he had burned his life down to impress. He hailed a passing yellow cab, throwing his 2 duffel bags into the trunk. He climbed into the back seat, the cracked vinyl burning against his skin. "Where to, buddy?" the driver asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Arthur stared out the window at the receding iron gates of the mansion. Through the bars, he could see Naomi standing on the front steps. She wasn't glaring. She wasn't gloating. She was simply directing a team of landscapers on where to plant a new row of white hydrangeas, her life continuing in perfect, undisturbed elegance. "Just drive," Arthur whispered, burying his face in his hands. "Just drive anywhere." Rain lashed against the cracked window of a Super 8 motel room in Skokie, a bleak suburb miles away from the glittering Chicago skyline Arthur used to own. He sat on the edge of a sagging, floral print mattress, staring blankly at a lukewarm cup of instant coffee. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the gates of his Lincoln Park mansion had clicked shut behind him, but it felt like 3 lifetimes. Arthur's descent into absolute ruin had been frighteningly swift. Without access to his corporate accounts, personal trust, or investment portfolios, he was practically a ghost in the financial system. His high-powered attorney, Harrison Forbes, had officially dropped him as a client after Arthur failed to produce a $75,000 retainer to fight the board's termination. "I'm sorry, Arthur," Harrison had said, over a brief or icy phone call. "But Vanguard is threatening to subpoena my firm if I continue to represent you using funds that are currently under forensic audit. You need to find a public defender for the civil suits. Good luck." The civil suits were a bloodbath. Sierra's vicious personal injury lawyer had successfully convinced a judge to garnish whatever meager liquid assets Arthur had left in his checking account. The media circus surrounding the lawsuit was relentless. Every tabloid, blog, and local news station covered the spectacular implosion of the billionaire who had thrown away an empire for a viral PR stunt. Sierra, playing the ultimate victim, had parlayed the scandal into a lucrative book deal and a massive social media following. She had moved to Los Angeles, leaving Arthur with nothing but a mountain of legal debt and a shattered reputation. Sitting in the motel room, Arthur opened his battered laptop. He had managed to secure a meeting with a cheap, strip mall bankruptcy attorney named David Fisher. David had taken one look at the mountain of injunctions, frozen assets, and the airtight legal trap Naomi had constructed, and simply sighed. "You have zero leverage, Mr. Pendleton," David had explained, rubbing his tired eyes. "Your ex-wife didn't just divorce you. She executed a flawless corporate takeover. Every contract you signed over the last 9 years was a loaded gun, and you handed her the trigger. Your only option to avoid federal prison for the outstanding corporate debt is to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You are going to lose it all." And he did. By December, Arthur was officially bankrupt. He was forced to take a mid-level consulting job at a dilapidated commercial real estate firm in the deep suburbs, earning a fraction of what he used to spend on vintage Bordeaux in a single month. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. He rented a cramped, one-bedroom apartment over a noisy laundromat. The sheer, suffocating humiliation of his new reality was a daily poison. On a freezing Friday evening, Arthur was sitting at a sticky bar near his apartment, nursing a cheap draft beer. The television above the bar was tuned to a local Chicago arts and culture segment. Arthur barely paid attention until a familiar, striking face flashed onto the screen. Naomi. Arthur's breath hitched in his throat. She looked magnificent, wearing a tailored white winter coat, standing in front of her newly expanded River North gallery. The chyron beneath her name read, Naomi Pendleton, Chicago's new visionary of art and equity. Tonight marks the grand opening of the Pendleton Carmichael Wing, the overly enthusiastic reporter gushed. Funded in part by Vanguard Equity, this massive expansion cements Naomi Pendleton as a true powerhouse in the international art world. The centerpiece of the exhibition is a stunning new installation by the owner herself. Arthur's hands trembled as he watched Sterling Carmichael, the man who had pulled the billion-dollar plug on Arthur's legacy, smiling warmly and cutting a red ribbon alongside Naomi. They were partners. Naomi had seamlessly absorbed his investors, his wealth, and his social standing. Desperation and a sick, masochistic curiosity clawed at Arthur's chest. He threw a crumpled $20 bill on the bar, walked out into the freezing wind, and drove his sputtering Honda into the city. He parked 2 blocks away from the gallery and walked through the sleet. The street was lined with black luxury SUVs and flashing camera bulbs. Arthur pulled the collar of his cheap wool coat up, hiding his face in the shadows as he joined the crowd of onlookers pressing against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the gallery. Inside, the gala was in full swing. Waiters circulated with champagne. Chicago's elite, Beatrice, William, Harrison, and dozens of people who used to kiss the ground Arthur walked on, were laughing, drinking, and admiring the art. At the center of the room stood Naomi, radiant and untouchable. Arthur's eyes drifted past his ex-wife to the centerpiece of the exhibition. It was a massive, abstract sculpture constructed entirely of shredded paper, encased in a towering obelisk of perfectly clear glass. It was beautiful, haunting, and sharp. Arthur squinted, reading the brass placard mounted on the pedestal beneath the glass. The title of the piece was The Morality Clause. Beneath the title, a small description was printed. Constructed from the original drafts of Pendleton Group's founding operational agreements, a study in the architecture of consequence. A cold, paralyzing realization washed over Arthur. He pulled out his cracked smartphone, his frozen fingers fumbling as he opened a web browser. He searched for the name of the food blogger who had originally filmed his disastrous proposal to Sierra at Bavette's. He scrolled through the blogger's contact page, clicking on the Management and Representation link. The screen loaded. The blogger was exclusively managed by a boutique public relations firm called Apex Media. Arthur's heart stopped. Apex Media was the firm Naomi had hired 3 years ago to handle the marketing for her art gallery. The final puzzle pieces slammed into place, creating a picture so horrifyingly perfect it made Arthur sick to his stomach. Naomi hadn't just reacted to the viral video, she had orchestrated it. She had seen the charge for the Cartier ring on his credit card statement weeks in advance. She knew he was planning to propose. Arthur suddenly remembered that he had originally booked a private, secluded table at a speakeasy for that Tuesday night. But the speakeasy had mysteriously called him that morning, claiming a water leak forced them to cancel his reservation. They had conveniently managed to secure him a replacement table in the middle of the dining room at Bavette's. Naomi had manipulated the reservation. Naomi had ensured her PR firm's top viral blogger was sitting exactly 2 tables away, armed with a smartphone. She had directed the entire play, setting the stage, casting the actors, and quietly watching from the shadows as Arthur enthusiastically tied the noose around his own neck. Arthur stood in the freezing rain, pressing his hand against the cold glass of the gallery window. He was a man who had built skyscrapers, who had believed he was the master of his universe. But looking at Naomi now, surrounded by the empire she had legally, brilliantly stripped from his bones, he finally understood the truth. He had never been the architect. He had always been the demolition site. Naomi turned her head, her dark, calm eyes scanning the crowd outside. For one fleeting second, her gaze locked onto Arthur's through the rain-streaked glass. She didn't flinch. She didn't look angry, or surprised, or vindicated. She simply raised her glass of champagne, took a slow, elegant sip, and turned away. And that is the terrifyingly brilliant story of how Naomi Pendleton turned a humiliating public betrayal into the ultimate corporate and personal checkmate. Arthur thought he held all the cards because of his money and his arrogance, but he completely underestimated the quiet, calculating genius of the woman he married. Naomi proved that the best revenge isn't loud, messy, or chaotic. It's strategic, patient, and absolutely devastating. Silence truly is the deadliest weapon when you are busy building an empire from the ashes of someone else's mistakes. What did you guys think of Naomi's master plan? Did Arthur get exactly what he deserved, or did Sierra's lawsuit take things too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this real-life drama, please hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who appreciates a flawless revenge story. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another unbelievable tale.